We exist to reflect the magnificence of God. We are made to reflect God's glory through our lives. It's why we're here. And we find our truest joy when we are fulfilling what the Creator intended us to do. That is why at DeWitt Evangelical Free Church, we are passionate about knowing Christ and making Him known by helping people connect with Christ, grow in faith, and love our God. Different times and circumstances shape how we do that. And this last few weeks has certainly made us think of different ways for us to help people connect with Christ, grow in faith, and love our God. Now, we're looking at the next season and asking ourselves that same question in the context of a reentry plan. How do we as a church continue being the church and help people connect with Christ, grow in faith, and love our God? This evening, I met with the leadership team at DeWitt Evangelical Free Church, and we have decided to set in motion a multi-phased plan as the saints return to church and we start working our way back to normal. This is going to take some time, and so we are going to move in phases. Tonight, I'd like to describe phase one of moving back to toward normal. First, we will begin public worship services at our church building this Sunday, May 10th. Yay! I know that all of us are sensing our great need for Christian fellowship and corporate worship. Each Sunday, we are grasping more and more how much our church community means to us. And so we want to take steps toward bringing us back to being in community. Now, we're going to move in phases in order to protect those among us who are more vulnerable and at risk of this virus. I don't have all the answers about how dangerous this virus is or isn't. Quite honestly, there are still many unknowns for all of us. Therefore, even though we are returning to church, one of our highest priorities is to protect those who are at higher risk, particularly our elderly and our special needs community. We've had people that we know that have become sick with this virus, some who used to come to our church. Some of us have family members that have become sick or even passed away through this. And when people do contract this virus, sometimes it's grave. And so we want to protect those that are the most vulnerable here. Also, our governor, Kim Reynolds, has given great freedom for churches to start meeting together as long as social distancing guidelines are observed, and we prioritize the safety and well-being of each other. I really greatly appreciate her sensitivity to our religious freedoms here in Iowa, and her desire to work with churches across Iowa rather than against the church. It's important that we honor and respect the officials that God has put over us, to pray for them, and certainly work within the guidelines that have been offered to us, especially when they have sought to work with us. That is one of the reasons that we need to proceed in steps rather than pretend like there's no crisis still happening around us. And so we need to be cognizant of those things. So here we are, and here are some of the things that you can expect on Sunday. We recognize that many of you are still just at too high of a risk to come back. I'm not going to make that decision for you. Each family needs to weigh out your circumstances and what is best for you in your circumstances. Some of you have underlying health conditions. Some of you work at hospitals. Some of you have different circumstances. And so you as a family need to pray about that, make those decisions for you. And we're going to do our best to protect those who are able to come and be a part of our worship services. And so we will have a public worship service at 9 a.m. And we will also work towards live casting our service either during the 9 a.m. hour or posting it immediately after. How we do the online portion is in development. So if you will be joining us remotely, keep an eye on our website and Facebook page for details. Furthermore, if you've been exposed to COVID-19 or you are experiencing symptoms consistent with the coronavirus, we're encouraging you just to join us remotely and take the appropriate measures before you return to public worship services with us. You can also expect what has become known as social distancing. We would ask you to help us in that effort. Try to follow the 6-foot guidelines that the state of Iowa is still encouraging us to hold to, but also be patient with each other. Love one another. Show forbearance and kindness toward one another. Don't grumble. Don't speak evil of one another. Mistakes are going to be made. And we're going to have a tendency toward one of two extremes, either not paying attention and just plowing our way through, or getting offended really easily and upset when people aren't as sensitive as we'd like them to be. Let's make sure that the way we respond to one another reflects the magnificence of our God and shows consideration to our fellow man and to our brother and sister in Christ. Now, this is how our volunteers are going to help in that process. When you arrive at church, our door greeters and ushers will be opening doors for you, but they won't be shaking hands. That way you have fewer surfaces that you and everyone else needs to touch. We will have hand sanitizer available in various places around the building as well. Downstairs, one of our ushers will take you to a seat so that we can space families apart and give some room for everyone. We're asking that families sit together. Children and students need to sit with their families. The only exception to that would be if your student is one of the ushers or on the praise team. But as a whole, families need to be sitting together so that we can spread everyone out. We will not be having an offering during the service as well, or passing offering plates. However, we know that this is still part of our worship that God has designed for us. So instead, you will find an offering box somewhere in the back of the auditorium that you can use at your convenience, and you should just be able to put your offering in there. And that way we can still do our part in helping the church meet some of its financial needs. We'll do something similar for communion on the 17th. You'll find the elements portioned out so that you can take the bread and the juice with you to your seat at the beginning of service when we will partake together. We'll do that in a way that everyone's not having to touch those surfaces. Some of you are wondering about face masks. There's no rule on whether you must wear one or not wear one. I know that there are various opinions on this. I know that some of you have made your own masks, and there are shortages in some places. I'm not going to set any rules on that, and the leadership of our church is not setting any rules on that. All I will say is that I will be wearing one as I will be visiting with various individuals through the day, and I'll remove it while behind the pulpit. My priority is to keep you safe, and anything that I can do to limit my exposure to you after I interact with a variety of people throughout the week is my priority. And so I'll be wearing one, but I'm not going to set any rules for everyone else. During this first phase of moving back to normal, the service itself is going to be shorter. We're going to have fewer songs and a shorter sermon. And during phase one, we won't have nursery, fellowship, or Sunday school. There will still be opportunity to visit with your church family and to encourage one another, to share life, to pray for one another, to pray with one another. But what we will do after the service is the ushers will dismiss each family. And then after that, we'll have opportunity as we spread out upstairs and downstairs, or as you go outside, depending on weather, for you to have some time to express your care and your love for one another in something besides Facebook care emojis. I myself will be somewhere in the back with Angie after the service. I really appreciate that time that I have with you each week. As many of you have needs that you express on your way out the door when we meet, or you'd like to express concerns, prayer concerns that I can be praying for you. But we won't be having a greeting line at the door. Angie and I will be back to the back, but we'll be more off to the side near the kitchenette area. So phase one of this moving back toward normal is going to be a little different. Some of it may feel restrictive, and some of it may feel awkward. I can't tell you how long this phase one will last, but we'll continue to evaluate that. And so it may feel a little bit awkward, but that's okay. The last time the church faced this challenge was in 1918, 102 years ago almost, when people were quarantined for the Spanish influenza and churches closed down completely. No online services, no nothing. And people didn't have church, and they were quarantined at home for 1 to 3 months in some places. Suffice it to say, no one in our church is an expert on moving back toward normal, unless you're a lot older than I think you are. So with great enthusiasm, we're going to start coming back together. We're going to take this in steps, and we're going to learn how to do life and worship with one another in phases. And all of that is for the glory of our great God as we are knowing Christ and making him known. I want you to know I'm looking forward to seeing many of you on Sunday. I'm praying for you. For those of us that aren't able to join us, we want you to know we're praying for you and thinking about you, and you are in our hearts. Your church leadership is praying for you. People in the body are praying for you, and we love you. I look forward to seeing each of you very soon.